Good evening, everybody. Thank you for coming here this evening for our roundtable discussion on police accountability. I really do appreciate you guys. I know it's a weekday in the evening. You guys can be anywhere else in the world, but you're here with us. So give yourselves a round of applause, please, for being here. Really thankful for you guys and your attendance and your presence, because this discussion is near and dear to my heart, and as well as others in the community. And this is a long fought issue, and we're going to really discuss kind of like the bills we're planning to introduce, hear from you guys, your take about what's going on in our communities, what do you guys see day to day, and what needs to be changed or improved. And so this is a system that's, if you look at it, it has to unravel, but a lot of connections in between, and trying to bring people together around this particular issue. So, I didn't introduce myself, by the way. Donavan McKinney, state representative out of Michigan's 14th House District. Welcome to the 14th House District. It goes primarily Hoover to the east, DeQuinder to the west, a little south of Davidson, inside of Detroit, and it goes all the way north to 13 Mile. So it includes all this area, parts of Moore and all of Center Line and northeast Detroit. And I'm here with my partner in crime, the amazing State Senator Stephanie Chang.
Hello! Wow, that's loud. Okay. Good evening. First, thanks so much to Representative McKinney and your team and my team for helping make this happen. This is really an important conversation, and one that we should be talking about more often. So I'm Stephanie Chang. I'm the State Senator for Senate District 3, which includes the west side of Warren, as well as a lot of Detroit, Highland Park, Hamtramck, Madison Heights, Hazel Park, and a few surrounding communities. For me, law enforcement and finding common sense ways to improve police practices and build on a lot of the work that many law enforcement agencies have already been doing across the state and across the country is just such a huge priority for me and many others in the legislature, because we know that it's good for our community members, and it's also good for law enforcement. And I think that we are kind of in this place where, we're 3 years after the murder of George Floyd. And I think that served as a wake-up call to a lot of folks. And we've just continued to see, all these videos, right, of folks who have been harmed. And then we've also seen very much that building and improving relationships between community and law enforcement is possible, it's important, it's a good thing to do. And so, we have worked on legislation, both Representative McKinney and I and a number of our colleagues over the past couple of years to try to address some of the issues that we believe actually help bring people together, and again, build on some of the things that some law enforcement agencies are already doing. And so I'll just quickly mention a couple of those things that we are working on. I think one of the things that stood out to a lot of folks about the George Floyd situation, right, is the importance of having officers clearly having a duty to intervene when they see another officer using excessive force. That obviously didn't happen then, and we know that in some cases across the state and across the country that's not happening here. But we also know that some police departments have adopted policies around duty to intervene, right? So we know that is a best practice, but it depends on where you are in the state of Michigan if your police department has this policy. We also know that chokeholds are something that on the whole, Michiganders understand that it's a problematic practice. Many police departments have already banned or limited very much the use of chokeholds, but we haven't done that on a statewide basis. We also know that training and ensuring that our law enforcement officers are trained on implicit bias, on behavioral health, on de-escalation is so critical and has a lot of support, both from law enforcement and the community. We also know that from a neighboring Macomb County community, we have seen where officers get disciplined or are on their way to getting disciplined in one agency and then left, and then got picked up by another agency. But there wasn't that automatic, here's what the records were, and here's what happened, and here's the excessive force issues that happened with that officer. We've got a bill that's in the works to help address that. No-knock warrants, many of you may know, or maybe you don't know, but Breonna Taylor's family actually comes from Grand Rapids, right here in Michigan. The issue of no-knock warrants is something that we need to address. Most law enforcement officers that we talk to recognize that it's not a good practice. It should only be used in very, very extreme cases, very limited cases. But again, we don't have necessarily a statewide policy related to this. And so there are so many things that we believe that we can do that are not only good for community members, but also really good for police officers, because we know that when we actually adopt really strong use of force standards, when we adopt policies that are very clear, things that help improve police-community relations, that actually we can decrease the number of injuries to officers too. So, and there's some great national studies on all of that. So, you know, so far we have been doing a lot of work on these bills. We've been talking about them with our colleagues and trying to build support for them. I should also note that we actually did previously introduce these bills last term, bipartisan, with both Republican and Democratic bills, and had hearings on those bills. Unfortunately, they did not move last term, but we're really hopeful that, you know, we can try to make sure that this is a priority in this legislature. And again, sometimes I feel like the issue of policing becomes politicized, but actually, it's many of the things that we're talking about are just common sense best practices that community and law enforcement alike understands are the things that we need to head towards. So I am always hopeful and always optimistic that we can really make these policies the law of the land in Michigan, because it should not matter if you're in Detroit or Warren or the UP or Grand Rapids or wherever. Everyone should be able to expect the same kind of standards when it comes to use of force, when it comes to some of these issues. So, but I'm really excited to be here today because I really want to hear from all of you. We both want to hear from you about your ideas and also any experiences that folks want to share, because we want to create the best possible policy.
Thank you, Senator Chang. With that being said, again, I appreciate the people that have walked in the room. Thank you guys for your attendance and being here. We really want to hear from you. I know we're going to use the majority of the time hearing from community members, hearing from you guys. What's really going on? What do you think we should be considering in terms of legislation? You know, what is your day-to-day experiences like? And what can we do to improve public safety and community relations? So, you know, don't all raise your hand at once, but whoever wants to speak, we'll pass the mic around. Try to help answer and just jot down notes. And we got our teams back there. I want to shout them out real quick. Rockman Lewis, he's on my staff. Zavako Plazetsky, he's right over there. Jackie, she's on Senator Chang's staff. Okay. Okay, cool. Okay. Yeah, does anyone have any experiences they would be willing to share about policing issues? Yeah, okay. Kick it off.
Okay, first and foremost, good evening, everyone. My name is Rick Brown. I'm a 45-plus year veteran of law enforcement, mostly Detroit Police, now Detroit Transit Police. I'm also a member of NOBLE, local chapter of NOBLE, National Organization of Black Law Enforcement Executives. Thank you both for putting this on together, and I can speak from law enforcement perspective. I agree with everything you said. My only concern is the messaging, and you touched on it, politicizing things. I'm so afraid that some of the goals that you guys are trying to achieve may be twisted and politicized to make it look worse than it is or benefit people that want to divide and conquer us. So that is my only concern, but I wholeheartedly agree with your premise of what you're trying to do. Noble has a program called On Your Community, where they strive to teach and train communities how to interact with law enforcement. So that's something that we should really look into and push as well.
What was the name of the program?
The program is called Law in Your Community.
Hi, my name is Donavan. Thank you guys so much for coming and putting this on. I really appreciate it. My question may make me look a little ignorant. I'm not sure, but in terms of the police force and all cities, when there's problems with the police or there's things that have occurred, what sort of recourse do the citizens have? Because it seems like when things go to the police, it gets handled by the police, and that just seems so backwards that anything else, there's like a system of checks and balances, and we have one organization that has so much power and control in people's lives that there is no check on their, we have a court system, but the court system is also wrapped in the legal system. So I know that recently I had a situation with an officer where was treated poorly just in terms of driving and I didn't get into the details, but going to the police station and reporting that the way that it was handled and addressed was I was a problem for just being a normal citizen, and it was very dismissive. The sergeant that was there, and it was we'll look into it. I never heard anything back about it, and I didn't really expect it. Wasn't anything super huge, but it's when something happens, we have no recourse. There's nobody that we can go to because the people that are supposed to be in charge are actually they're not helpful to the citizens, and so as a citizen you feel very helpless, and and I don't believe that the way that the police officers treat people is with the you'll see on the sides of their cars where it says to serve and protect, but that's not the attitude that they walk around on our streets with. So that's all I have to share. Thanks.
I appreciate you sharing that. One of the things that I'm not sure if you know about the history of the city of Detroit and the police department, but there was a time in the 50s, 60s, 70s, they had something called stress, where 4 cops would be to each squad car, and they would get out and start just knocking people's heads off. Particularly, it would be white officers or black people, black residents of Detroit. And the response was when Young came into prominence and he became mayor, one of the first things he did, he campaigned on it, was put in the city charter for the voters of Detroit to vote on a board of police commissioners. And some cities have it throughout the state, but not all. But this board of police commissioners are supposed to be an elected body by the citizens of Detroit. Sometimes they can be appointed by the mayor, but oftentimes they have to run for election. And they have nothing of the system is perfect. However, they have done more than I've seen other cities have done in terms of being proactive, being, listening and being engaging of the residents of their community. I know the city of Warren is doing, I think they have a Crown Commission police interaction. And I think that should be something, an avenue that we should look at for the city and other cities across the state. I'm sure the city.
I totally agree. I think that having a citizen oversight board could make a big difference. You know, the Detroit Police Department, they have one, as Rep. McKinney mentioned. I think they do in Ann Arbor as well. I can't remember which other cities in Michigan. There's a list somewhere. But I think it could make a big difference, and maybe that's something that folks can push for at the local level. The other thing I'll note is that, you know, ensuring that there's a fair complaint process is really important, and making sure that there's follow-up, I think is really critical. I know that there are some other colleagues in the legislature who are also looking at this idea around transparency. Not really sure where things are at on that, but the idea of something to be able to know, okay, well, this is the officer who did this, just so that there is some level of public awareness. But again, obviously we know that the details of that would really matter in terms of like making sure that it's done in a way that is as responsible as possible. But again, maybe we could follow up with you too to find out like when this happened and if there's any help that we can do to follow up. But thank you for sharing.
Go into more detail about what a police oversight board would do for a city.
So the police oversight board, I've been to a couple of meetings, and essentially they have to report to this elected board, this elected body, like what's going on in terms of, you know, how many stops that, you know, these officers are doing citywide and by precinct. They go to like really deep details, like what is the crime stats and all this stuff, and then if they hear reports from community about, you know, there's some, you know, various things going on within the, you know, within certain officers or whatever it may be, that they flesh that out during those meetings, as well as behind closed doors as well, to try to figure out what is the best avenue to try to solve these issues. And so it does work to some degree. Like I said before, nothing is perfect that we come up with, but at least it's an avenue for folks and a safeguard, so to speak, so people can have an opportunity to voice their concerns and be heard. That's really what we want to do with these bills, to ensure that community voices are heard, and then, you know, there aren't the ones, you know, being attacked day to day. Like their voices are, you know, this is something that we need to do. So, I mean, to your question, Councilman, I want to also shout out the councilman. He's the new councilman in this district out of Warren, Alan Newman. And so he asked this question because he's going to a city council meeting later this evening. And I'm sure he's going to be talking to his colleagues about it, saying, hey, you know what, let's try to set up a city. Oh, Melody McGee's here too. She's a city councilwoman out of Warren, and a city councilwoman too. She made history being the first person of color ever elected to Warren City Council. And this is why we wanted to have this conversation, and I'm going to, you know, let you guys talk. One of the things we were aiming at is that understanding the 8-mile border, right? We need to understand the significance of it, understand the history, but also we need to realize that it's no longer a border, that everybody's free-flowing back and forth, and it doesn't matter what race you are, it doesn't matter which side of 8 Mile you're on, you deserve to be protected, you deserve to be heard, and these bills are for you guys to put accountability measures, because most fields, if you look at most professions, they have accountability measures, and here in this state, some states have done better than we have, but they put those accountability measures on, and you're starting to see a decline in terms of, you know, police, bad interactions between police and community. We want to bridge that gap, and I'll leave it there because I feel like I'm talking today.
One thing I also, actually, this is great. They have a lot of information on the Detroit Board of Police Commissioners website about even just their history. So they actually were created in their city charter. So I'm not sure if they would need to, maybe you can figure out what needs to be done if we were to create one in Warren. But in addition to taking complaints, I didn't realize this, they actually they can help establish some department policies and approve its budget, and they're the final authority for appeals on employee discipline, which I guess I didn't know, I hadn't really heard of those words. And so it's actually a really powerful body. And so if someone were to craft a policy for a new department in a city like Warren, making sure that it's a board that actually has some authority, I think is really important, right? So that it's not just a board that sits there and isn't able to do anything.
Yeah, you asked to share our experience, and then I'll have a follow-up with a question. You know, I grew up with men in my family that are police officers. I don't know that we were technically even related, but I was like, oh, my uncle's a cop, and that's what I grew up as. And so grew up with a high level of respect for officers, and still do. But as I grew older, high school, moved into college, it became normal to constantly be tailed by police officers. Christian college, going back and forth to church, going back and forth to youth groups, and it would be weird if a cop wasn't tailing me as I leave my college campus. Then, like, one of the worst experiences that I had with a police officer, I'm lucky, but we were driving home. I was going 5 under on the highway, like just coming back to my in-laws. See a cop pulling the turnaround. I drive past him, just driving normal. He pulls me over, and I'm like freaking out because I'm like, I was going 5 under, so why are you pulling me over? Immediately comes to the car, hyper aggressive, starts asking me about drugs, starts like, I was like, I don't have any drugs, I'm a pastor, I can't smoke because I'd lose my job, right? And didn't want to hear any of it. It was super aggressive. Threatened to bring dogs. My wife was asleep with our first child in the back seat. My wife sat up and he saw my wife, who happens to be white, completely changed. He was very pleasant, was very nice, was very kind. He was like, oh, I'll let you off on a warning. A warning for what? Abiding by the law. And so I know some people say like this experience isn't as bad as the media might make it sound like it's worse, but the reality is, like my story, I'm blessed. I kept on driving. I pulled off because I was scared. I was like, I need to take a break from driving. But like almost every single person in my family, especially the men, have not just one, not just two, but dozens of stories that is worse than mine. I have the privilege to be the luckiest person in my family in regards to my interaction with the police force. And I think it's a cultural thing. And this comes with a question. Driving in Madison Heights, used to work at Starbucks, definitely speeding. Just driving 4 o'clock in the morning, just trying to get to work. Cop pulls me over, and he goes, do you know why I pulled you over? I'm like, I was probably speeding. And he's like, well, where do you work at? And I'm in the parking lot of Starbucks when he pulled me over. I just went at that one. He has a conversation, checks my stuff, and said, I'm gonna let you off. Just next time, drive safe. It was very pleasant. I've had many interactions with the police force in Madison Heights, and they are amazing officers. Their former police chief is just such a phenomenal human being. And so you see that culture of not just one, I'm happy because I got out of a ticket, but even when they do have encounters with with citizens and they make arrests and everything, they do it with such a high level of respect. That's very unique to see in some places, and I think it's a cultural issue. And there's such a lack of transparency. And so I'm not trained as a citizen to interact with police officers, and I don't think that's my responsibility to go through a training to interact with someone who I'm paying to protect and serve me. And so when I interact with a police officer, I expect to be treated well with a high level of respect, and also there's just such a lack of transparency sometimes with certain departments. So I can go to the Madison Heights website and pull up their body count policy, but when we tried to do that here in the city of Warren, we had to FOIA it. And the FOIA was initially was denied by the police commissioner. He refused to release the body count policy. And then we had the FOIA, and eventually we went through the process of FOIA it, and it got denied. So our only recourse now to see the body count policy in the city of Warren is by taking it to the circuit court, which is just insane, because I can name several other departments where I can right now on my phone pull up their body count policy. And so if I'm expected to trust someone, there's a due level of transparency. And so I don't think we should be afraid of the word accountability, because I'm in an accountability group, right? Accountability is healthy, and if you're afraid of it, that's that's a sign of something. And so if we're talking about transparency and accountability, we really need to look at transparency first, because we can't even hold someone accountable because there's walls and policies that they're hiding behind.
Thanks for sharing that. I'll just note that, first of all, thank you for sharing your personal experiences and being willing to be open about that. And I think you're right that there are so many who have similar or worse situations. And I also am hearing you talk about the difference depending on where you are, and both in terms of what your interaction is, what the culture of a police department is, and also what the policies are, and if you can find the policies. So I actually did want to note that in, I think of all of our bills that are related to like a use of force policy or some type of, and also body cam, that we would require agencies to just post it. If you have a website, to post it or make sure it's publicly available, because that should be the bare minimum, right? So appreciate that. And body cams are interesting because a lot of law enforcement, and feel for others, if you're in law enforcement, feel free to chime in, but I remember when body cams first became a thing, there were a lot of folks who were sort of worried about, what is this going to do? But actually, a lot of law enforcement really support body cams because very often it shows that, the officer was doing the right thing, more so than not. But in the cases where they are doing the wrong thing, then we have that footage as well. So, but if we don't have the policies and we're not sure what's happening with those body cams, then absolutely there's a huge gap.
And also, just to shed some light too, part of the package bills that we're considering is, body cam tampering, outlawing that, putting some, guidelines around that issue, and then also the duty to intervene, which means that if your partner, say you pull somebody over, or you're coming onto a stop, and you see your partner, your other officer, doing too much, right? Using excessive force, or just doing, just taking advantage of the badge, so to speak. You have that right, but also you must intervene and say, hey, stop this. And I appreciate cops that do it day to day, because we do have some good ones, but we have some knuckleheads that take it far enough, and they have the ability, especially out there in the public. They're the ones that are wearing that badge. They're the officers of the law. Some of them do take advantage of that law, and it's sad to say, some people end up, beat up or sometimes dead. So we're trying to do everything possible to, curtail that and limit those type of experiences from happening to people that look like me, but just don't look like me. These are just regular citizens that deserve to be protected and so.
But the question was related to officers in schools, basically. So there are school resource officers. I'm paraphrasing because I could also only hear school resource officers in schools, and she referenced a study. And so anyway, I don't think there's anything in our current bill package, at least from what we've been working on, but maybe we can check and see if anyone else is working on something. I do know that, so let's just be very clear that, with the school shootings that have happened in Michigan, in the wake of those, the idea of more school resource officers in schools has come up, and thankfully that has not necessarily come to fruition. And I think that a lot of the folks who work on gun violence issues recognize that it's not an effective way to stop gun violence in schools. So hopefully we can, really try to keep the conversation focused on that.
And to your point, that's something that is not a part of this bill package, but I will take a look into it. I think you're right. I've been hearing, I've read stories before of 5-year-olds being put in the back of the paddy wagon, police vehicles, and put in handcuffs. And that scars children like that. Literally, and then for me, I want to try to help the police, so to speak, because I want them to get the best officers possible. And if you talk to any group of kids nowadays, they don't want to be cops. They are totally afraid of this entire system. They don't want anything to do with so we have to put in these laws to not only save us as communities, but even save the police. And like the future of them and having good cops out there. Because there are some, but I'm just, it's sad, but I've gotten so many reports to my office since I've taken the oath. This entire year, this is my first year in office. I've gotten so many reports of people who are being harassed and beat up and do not feel heard. And, when Senator Chang and I came together on this package and a few others, and I got to give a shout out to the Michigan Legislative Black Caucus, because they're putting their full support around this. We have to get this done in this Democratic legislature, because I'm afraid if we don't, it's going to keep getting kicked down the sideline. And I just can't witness another killing. I just do not want that in any of our communities, and I don't want our families and our people going through that again. So I just want to put that out there. But you're right, we have to look into those liaison officers, because I have been hearing recently that they have been some of the problem and why these kids are getting kicked out of school. And it just depends on who's well liked and if that person likes you or not. So, yeah.
I was disappointed because I was trying to convince a couple police officers before coming here to be in this meeting, to attend it. And they did not want to attend it, but after I explained a couple of things to them, they said, well, if we move forward, we would like to be a part of that. Bring us back some feedback. But the truth is, we don't know what the process is. I was a global business process leader, and I sat with every individual at GM that was in my department, learned what their job was all about, took out the waste of the job, and made it better. And we need to know what the process is for their departments, for the leaders of that department. We need to know what their job description is all about. And if it's not on their job description, then we need to put new processes in place. One of the things that I done when I worked with skilled trades, and we were going through an interviewing process, well, I would say, who's that person of color in the room? They had 10 white men interviewing people of color. We need to make sure that in that interviewing room, that we have not only a process in place, but we will have diversity in there, people who understand and is concerned about our citizens, and then bring that information to the citizens within that city. And that's the most important part, because that's accountability. It's in writing what you are supposed to do. And if you don't do it, then we're going to hold you accountable. But I don't believe that's happening. It's one of the things that me and the other city councilman, Hal, talked about. And they said that we'll be part of being in that room and making it happen. Because what's a fit to us is not a fit to them. And we want it to be a fit for all. Thank you for your time.
Okay. Thank you so much, Councilmember. We appreciate that. And also wanted to note that in the past, one of our colleagues had actually introduced legislation around scholarships, around hiring, specifically more diverse law enforcement officers. I'm not sure if this bill is going to be introduced or not, but it definitely is, part of the mix in terms of, let's think about how to make sure that we're getting more diverse folks into the police force. But at the same time, we also recognize that our folks are going to want to do it if we don't do these other things first to help improve sort of the culture that they're stepping into. So we've got to do all of the above.
real quick. Take care, guys. Have a good council meeting. And congratulations.
Hi, my name is Libby Martin. I'm a resident in Warren. I live actually just down the street. And I'm glad that you guys are hosting this so close to my home. It made it really easy for me to come. So just back to like sharing experiences with police in Warren. Earlier this year, back in May, I was headed to the post office. And y'all know where No Nose Pizza is? It's right here at the end of the street. So I pulled out of my street and I saw an officer shove a black man off of his bike to the ground, immediately jumped on top of him and pulled out his taser. Because of, you know, the uprising in the BLM movement in 2020, I learned to pull over and whip out your phone and start recording. So I did that, and all I could hear was the man that they were harassing just kept asking, "Why are you doing this? Why are you doing this?" He had no idea why he was immediately like just jumped onto why the taser was pulled. Within like seconds and minutes, there was over 10 cop cars there just for this one man who was already on the ground and in handcuffs. He was arrested, put in the back of the car. The officers did not like that I was recording. It's all on, I put it live on Facebook. If anybody wants to see the video, you can see this. This is all true. And yes, they didn't like that I was recording. And they refused to give badge numbers. It was Officer Gifford, David Gifford, who still is listed as staff of Warren Police Department on his LinkedIn. He was put on leave, and I'm pretty sure it's only because I took video, and you know, you got the email along with Dwyer, and Lori Stone was rep at the time as well, and Susan Smiley wrote an article about it, so we got out there. And yeah, I demanded that body cam footage be released. It was not. I asked her what her policy is, never got it. Did a FOIA, it got denied. And quite honestly, like, I just didn't know what to do from there. What do you do? So yeah, they, you know, placated us and said he's on leave, there's an investigation, but we don't know what happened. He's still on staff. So because I put it on live, a friend of mine actually messaged me within an hour or something saying, "Oh my God, my sister's wife was harassed by the same officer 3 hours prior." Again, David Gifford. And there's video of that on Facebook as well. So within 3 hours, this officer went on rampage and violently hurt a black woman with mental health and a black man. And he's still on staff. Like, it just doesn't make sense. And then, you know, later in the year, we all heard the story of Jaquan Smith being punched and brutalized by Officer Rodriguez while inside the police department in Warren. Thank God that was on video as well. But, you know, I just, you know, with all due respect, I think it's important that we use the word like these are violent and it's being targeted. Like, honestly, this is just, I guess, like my biggest example of what's wrong with Warren Police Department. There's so many others. Living here for 6, almost 7 years now, there's so many stories that I could go on with. You know, it feels like they go hunting in our neighborhoods. And yeah, I don't have a lot of faith in the stuff that's being brought on by Democrats in the House. You know, the registry that you referred to, that would be amazing. You know, I had a lawyer friend of mine do some digging on Gifford and found that he had other offenses in other municipalities. So, you know, he's got a history. And did we look into that when we were hiring him? You know, probably not. But yeah, even the Democrats voted down this registry. It did not get passed. It didn't go through.
sorry that, that these terrible experiences are happening. I hear you too on the frustration, and I think it's fair to say that McKinney and I also feel frustrated because there are things that we're pushing for that are like so common sense and so basic in terms of policy change that we haven't even been able to introduce. So it's been very challenging. But there are issues that we are so passionate about, so we're trying to do our best. But on the issue of officers hopping around, because I think this is a really important issue, we do have a couple of bills that would address that. That I'm hoping that we can introduce and get done. And one of the pieces also is around giving MPOLs, which is this basically it's the licensing agency at the state level, giving them greater authority to revoke licenses, period, when we know an officer has been using excessive force. Because the statute that created this body, MPOLs, is not as strong as it should be in terms of actually giving them more authority. And we've actually heard from some police chiefs too that recognize that there are some folks that they have still working for them that they would really like to not have there anymore, but they don't currently have the tools to be able to do that. I'm not saying this is the situation here because I don't know, but absolutely I hear you on the frustration. So it's something that we hope to be able to get done.
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Sheree, and my family and I were victims of police abuse. And I want to know, what can we do about the search and seizure law? Like where an officer know that a citizen don't know the law on what is protocol and what is not protocol, and then they box them in this box, and then once they get in that court system, they're locked. And that's what happened to my brother. I did research and know that they searched that car without a search warrant. It didn't belong to him. So anything they found in there shouldn't have been put on him. But they did that anyway. And then I tried to let the court system know. And I feel like they knew it was a lawsuit. So they locked him in. Even with some of the lawyers that paid, we paid one. She wasn't willing to get the evidence removed. So it's like, what can we do for that? What kind of justice can be done for that? Because that's wrong.
Sorry, I feel like I want to know a little bit more about the circumstances of that. Was someone charged in that situation?
Yes.
Okay. And then was the whatever was found in the car, was that used against them?
Yes.
And was there a defense attorney?
It was. There's only a defense attorney. I did research on her for a year, and it's like the judge when I went to court, like railroad court. And you just went to law school and you just fresh out the box, you're gonna go do whatever they say. She kind of broke down a few times in the courtroom because they knew the time it was. And I feel like I need to be a voice for my brother and for many other people that I know that's locked up because of things that were done wrong.
Okay. If the evidence okay, let's talk offline because I feel like we should try to get some more details. I'm not sure where things are in the process right now, but maybe our teams can follow up with you. Thank you.
And Norm, you probably got something to say, right, on that issue? Okay, but there was a lawsuit, especially in Wayne County. What, any updates on that? Do you want to?
I have no updates on that.
My name is Norman Clement. I'm the director of the Detroit Change Initiative, executive director of Detroit Change Initiative. So we do outreach in Detroit, but also we're doing some outreach here in Warren because we know the massive change, we're all one. The thing is that we're dealing with police accountability and police transparency is that a lot of times, just like Officer Gifford, this officer here, many officers have gone around, hopped around, and cost taxpayers millions and millions of dollars that we do not have to fund our schools, our activity resource centers for our children, our activities to make our communities better. There has to be something where that officer, if he's still in that position and keep him in that position, somehow, some way, his pension is taxed, and those funds are back to the citizens. Because too many times, these officers depend on the city's insurance plan to pay out victims. We have, I think in Detroit, there's one cop named Mad, called RoboCop, cost the city of Detroit over $25 million during the time that we're closing rec centers, closing programs. And so imagine how many officers the cities have paid out to victims of money and resources that we can't have a park because we didn't pay $10 million to a victim, but that same officer is still on the force. That same money that we paid out must come out the pensions or must come out that law enforcement that still has them on the job. If that happens, trust me, they will clean up. Because no one risks anybody to be on the job and costing the department money, also costing community money. And so there has to be accountability on that so we have a record say, okay, you want to work here, but you didn't cost $20 million to a whole department, a whole community. You, sir, are at risk. Also on top of that, screening process, how we vet officers, a track record, also daily instructions of if there is a mental breakdown, and that all has to be in the bill. What's going on? We can see triggers that are coming. It's something that how we can step or we can reform that, but there has to be some type of accountability, some type of leeway where if you keep supporting, because I pay my taxes, I support officers. My uncle was an officer in the city of Detroit. I have 5 mentors who are officers in the city of Detroit. I love cops. I need cops in our community. But I pay for good cops. I don't support the bad cops. No one pays for bad cops. So the bad cops are still on the force. They have to be accountable and refund that money that's been paid out back to the city of Detroit, to the citizens.
David Strong. I just wondered, does anyone know what the cost of for an individual officer's body cam is?
It's the story.
Body cameras are actually somewhat new. Okay? When you think about the time frame. And policies and procedures had to catch up to the actual issue in wearing of body cameras. Like Chang said, I had to convince my officers, they originally were against it, but then I had to convince them that it's a lifesaver for you a lot of times. It prevents people from making false accusations. However, on the flip side, it also helps the management to, when we do audits of camera footage, and if we see behavior that's not appropriate, we can address it, we can issue discipline. That's a good thing. However, over the years, we realized the cost of storage, like the young lady said earlier, she was doing FOIAs for videos and things like that, body camera videos, and they were gone. We are just now catching up to the fact that we have to have money and storage. The storage is extremely expensive. We have to have money and storage to provide the ability to save all that. Another thing we have to do, we have to hire personnel to actually monitor, extract, and do all that thing. So there's a lot of costs associated with body camera, video and footage, and storage. That's the biggest thing, storage. And no one really thought about how to pay for that.
Well, I just thought if there was a number to throw out there, 1,000, you know what I'm saying? So you could like ballpark, say 200 officers or more. Do all warrant police officers right now have body cams or not?
As of like this year.
Yeah, as if we're speaking right now.
They just started.
Okay, and then, is that true that the police cars have a dash cam that goes on no matter, all police cars and more have it? But in general, what you say? Okay, is that pretty much, okay. Okay. So the guy that was in the beatdown in the jail here, he selectively had his off, right? The other officers that filmed him, that Rodriguez guy, is that the guy? Yeah. So he didn't have his on, but the other ones did. Film him, right? Right, but he had one, he didn't have, I think that was, but in any event, if I pulled you over, it says, know, I'm saying this could get ugly. Whoops, hey, I fell off for 30, you know. So, having said that, what's the procedure policy if they could prove, hey, the guy turned it off and then look away, you know? Is there any repercussions if he selectively turns his body cam off or on during the course of, you know, his duties? What happens then? Conveniently, oh, it's off. I guess, you know. Yeah, well, whatever. I'm just saying, I don't know what's up there, like the one gentleman said here about there's nothing to enforce if you found out he purposely did that, you know, because he knew kind of what he was getting into when he got out of the car. You know, so what happened? Big deal, right? Oh,
To answer your question, since there's no state law around it right now, it's in our package. It goes from department to department. They can decide how they want to deal with it in terms of that.
but there's no guideline or there's no, I understand what you're saying, but is there something out there that say, hey, we can like look at this kind of as a baseline and say this one seems to be working for that?
Oh yeah, there's best
Okay, so they got something to kind of go on, and they didn't reinvent the wheel. And lastly, you mentioned the cost. Yeah, I mean, I can see where, you could say a lot of things if the budget was unlimited, but I just wondered if the ballpark more and say, I mean, I know Big Wrench is sitting on hundreds of millions, right, that she's giving out. Well, whatever.
So just on the body cam thing, so again, we've got a bill about this, but again, we have to get it introduced and then moved and then passed and signed into law. But I do know that, you know, responsible law enforcement leaders will, so actually, because I'm trying to remember which agency this was, but, and I don't want to share necessarily which person, but I know that there is a former police chief who feels very strongly about this, and I believe he actually did discipline one of his officers who turned off their body cam. So the thing is, I think there are law enforcement leaders who recognize that it is wrong to turn off your body cam intentionally while you're in the middle of doing something that we should see. But again, like from McKinney mentioned, it just depends on where you are in the state and who's the police chief and what's the culture there and do they have a policy or not, which is exactly why we need to pass something at the state level so that it can be consistent statewide. So appreciate all the conversation about body cam because it makes us feel like even more so that we need to get this done.
Okay, I just wanted to, you know, hey, is it a wish list or at least if we had a number, we could, hey, it's attainable, it's not, you know, that's all I'm trying to get at. Hey, it's going to cost 500, like whatever it is, just throw it out there and then say, hey, are we behind the sky or is it?
So just to give you a ballpark number, so I'm on appropriations, I'm over the correction budget, so MDOC budget, and this is the first time we're going to institute body cameras for our correction officers inside the prison facilities. And it's a lot. It's like millions. So, but that's for 29 prison facilities, and then across the state, you got like workers, correction officers. So I mean, when you break that down, I don't have the ballpark number in my head, but it can cost probably like tens of thousands per year.
But I just wondered too, the guys about the lawsuits and, you know, I'm saying a couple of them could add up to, well, whatever, just food for thought, throw it out there, see what comes out. That's all.
A few years back, I had some encounters with the Warren Police Department myself. Over a 2-week period, I was pulled over 8 times. And most of the situations weren't a big deal, but, you know, a few of the times, get out of the car, get to the back of your car, and never issued a ticket. And so after a while, I just kind of wondered, you know, 8 times in 2 weeks was kind of excessive to me. Went to the police department, talked to them, and found out that the situation was they said, there's a guy that looks like Santa Claus that's picking up prostitutes and buying drugs. And so I drop people off of 8 Mile. I'm serious, this really happened. And you know, I actually commend the Warren Police Department because after I brought it to their attention, I mean, they were pretty chill about it and pretty transparent about it. And sometimes I wonder, you know, we want protection, but I don't think we should vilify the police either. And, you know, I mean, the police are here to serve. Of course, there's sometimes a few bad apples that have to be dealt with. And, you know, how do you find the balance? Because, you know, some people think we should just disband the police department, and that's a goofy idea completely, because if we disband the police, we wouldn't have law and order in our cities. And some people think just get rid of the cops, and they have that as their marching orders or their thought process, which is equally bad an idea. You know, I mean, a guy that has a gun, you don't send a social worker to discuss it with him. You know, a guy that's carjacking somebody. I was the victim of a carjacking. I had a gun put to my head, I had a knife put to my throat, and they wanted my car. And luckily, I survived that particular experience. And, you know, I don't think that some people really have the mindset that there's one individual or a handful of individuals, and so let's demonize and vilify the police as all bad. Just like when there's a teacher that's out of order or whatever, you know, sometimes we think, you know, all teachers are bad or all people. And so you have to be real careful, and it has to be a balanced approach. And realize the majority of cops that I've come into contact with are good at their job, and they care. And it's a tough profession too. They're under a lot of stress. They see a lot of things that probably most of us don't experience. And in our food pantry, occasionally we have people that have mental health issues and, you know, are just out of order. And so sometimes, you know, it requires police intervention. And I've always found the Warren Police to be good by and large. And so have I had bad experiences? Yeah, a few times. But by and large, I think if we looked at the totality, the bigger picture, we have a decent police force in our city.
Thank you for sharing that, and definitely, you know, I agree that there are many good officers in every jurisdiction, right? But we also know that there are some who have abused their authority, and so the only way that we can really start to change culture and start to, you know, make sure that that the ones who are there who aren't doing the good things and following the rules and, you know, not using excessive force, we have to build a system of accountability, and we have to improve the standards of police practices. And again, so many agencies are already doing the right thing and adopting many of these policies, but again, we've got to make sure that it's a statewide. So I appreciate you sharing your perspective.
So I live in Mount Clemens, and a lot of this conversation is kind of based around cities that have their own police departments and have a little bit more authority over what goes on there. The city of Mount Clemens, we have a contract with the sheriff's office to handle the police in our city. And so when we have issues that come up, we really have to rely on our sergeant our substation to follow through on them. But we aren't always really guaranteed that will happen. Sometimes we've had in the past officers who have really been in trouble in our community, reassigned, and then ended up being sent back. Really just kind of feel, as well, commissioners here, I feel like we lack the control to be able to ask for more accountability and kind of do some of the things in the city police that do have contracts with other law enforcement agencies, we might run into some issues. It would be nice for us to have a little bit more accountability.
Yeah, just one quick thing. Spencer, I know we talked earlier, I want everybody in the room to know Spencer is the newly elected to the Cleveland City Commission. Oh yeah, you want to make some noise for that. Proud of you, man, and I know we got some transparency issues to deal with because you guys are contracted with the sheriffs. Similar to a lot of what we heard today about the FOIA process, the sheriffs are making you guys FOIA them as city commissioners. I don't think that's right, especially as a commissioner. You should be able to get information you need. And I told you this, the information, because we have to make decisions every single day as legislators on behalf of the people we serve. And the only way we can make the best decision is with, the information we're provided. If we're not provided up to date and true factual information, we can't make those decisions the best we can. So we need to work on that. I appreciate you sharing that. I do want to give a shout out to a couple people in the room that I think State Rep Kimberly Edwards walked in. She's in the back. She represents part of Detroit, all of East Point, and Roseville. I want to give a shout out to my beautiful wife in the back. Thank you for coming. And then go ahead.
Hi, so I just wanted to make a couple comments. So the one gentleman who left, the Santa Claus guy, so what he talked about was really profiling, right? So the good thing about that is, he can cut his hair, he can color it, and he can, now no longer be profiled. But if you are a certain demographic, you can't change that. So that's the problem. It's the profiling that, in the culture. So what is the culture of the police department? Because that's not, you can have body cams and you can do all those things, but it's the culture. It has to change. Also, lack of diversity. There has to be some diversity. And this young lady here, when you talked about your brother and some of the situations that he, encountered, there's, you need advocacy groups, because the truth of the matter is if you don't have finances, money, you're gonna get railroaded. It's just what it is. That's just that's just what it is. And you need strong advocacy groups where if you saw that there was an issue with your brother, there should have been an organization that maybe you can call who would champion for you, because without the knowledge, the money, the power, it's hard to champion for yourself. You have to rely on other people to do that. So I'm happy to see that you guys are sponsoring a bill that could help, because I'm the mom of 3 Black boys. So of course, I'm always concerned. And the fact that they're all college educated, they all do well. But I told him, I said, if you get stopped by the police, he's not gonna allow you to speak proper English. He sees you as a Black man, period. And unfortunately, that's a stigma. So there has to be diversity and also stronger advocacy groups.
Absolutely right. Oh, yeah, we can clap back for that. I'm going to share this real quick before our next comment. Literally, when I came to Lansing in January, I think it was late January, and I had my first press conference as a state representative. That press conference was about the death and murder of Tyree. I'm not sure if anybody remembers Tyree. Shot and killed by the police. I believe it did. And it was crazy because we had the press conference literally like at the end of the month. And we all know what's going on, especially at the end and the beginning of months, especially dealing with traffic and police officers. They have an unwritten quota that nobody wants to talk about, but we all kind of know. If you know, you know what's going on. And so, me and my team, we drive, me and my staff rock in the car, we pull up there, and we're 2 Black young men. The youngest Black currently serving in the Michigan legislature, right now at the age of 31. And you being a mom of 3 black boys, my mom is the mom of 2 black boys, me and my brother. And she calls us, and she calls me in particular every day because I have to come out and drive to Lansing or deep into Macomb County or all across the state. And she worries about my health and well-being. And she's afraid. We pray on the phone, weekly, sometimes daily. And because I have this badge on my head, I might get a little privilege, but in reality, it doesn't matter. I'm still a black dude at the end of the day. And so what you just touched on is near and dear to my heart. It's a narrative of a lot of black folks in this room, but also in our communities. And this is the crux of why we need to really do these bills and hold officers accountable. But we're not trying to attack anybody, but we're saying, hey, you know what? You guys have so much power. We need to bring that thing in. Because if we don't, more incidences are going to happen, and we're going to continue hearing the same old. We're going to open up our phones every day and just watch terror happening to people that look like us. And I'm really, I'm really emotional about it. I'm trying to stay calm, but it is hurtful to see, and we need to put a stop to it. And, I know these bills ain't going to be the end all be all. I know they're not going to stop everything, but we at least need to start somewhere because our system is broken in the state, and other states have been able to do a better job than us. And I just don't want to see Michigan fall by the wayside. I don't want to see any more deaths. I'm just tired of seeing it.
This is the information that's going on in Detroit. The officer was charged with fatally assault of a 71-year-old man. Also in Lansing, a family of Lansing, a young man shot by the Lansing officer. The family files $100 million lawsuit in Lansing right now. And so we're talking about, it's not just police transparency. This is really about really understanding what our tax dollars are for. Keep that in mind. That's $100 million. If this law was passed last year, that $100 million, how many rec centers we need? How many education centers we need? How many services that we can add for the city? That $100 million can apply for police and community reform so they can be more engaged in police officers. So everything in life that we have so far has updated. The iPhone updates, our policy updates. The only thing that stayed consistent since the beginning of time is our police officers. Right now, in the stressful situation, we need to help them out. Transparency, police transparency, is a way to help them out. Also monitor the funds that were going on. Instead of, we put so much funding in the police officers, making sure that the funding goes to the officers who are serving. Not buying a bunch of weapons of war, buying more cameras, buying more services. Officers are a stressful job. They also understand working over maybe the average officer works probably 14, 15 hours a day. So that's stress. Those services, they need them. And so this transparency program is something that they need. And so that we can support them the best way we can.
Norm, thank you for that. And we're going to get a couple other comments, but I just want to touch on this. One of the other bills we're doing is not a part of this package. It's part of another package called the Public Safety Trust Fund. It's a fund that's going to be set up in perpetuity, which means pretty much forever, as long as we're around, where we're going to put dollars to local departments to beef up support, not only for, the health care and pension support, because a lot of our officers got their pensions cut and things of that nature. They were crying, and it's not just officers, city employees, period. But one of the things we're doing is looking at the mental health aspect of our officers. Because, over the years, I've been able to do ride-alongs, police ride-alongs. I've been able to talk to officers in every level, from federal all the way down to local. And, a lot of times they tell me, especially I got people in my own family who are officers too, and they tell me they get jaded over time. They try not to, but you get cynical. Even in our positions as elected officials, you become cynical after a while because you just figure out like, man, this is a big system. We can't solve everything, it's just going to be the same old. Status quo going to ring true. But in reality, when you're an officer and you're on the beat and you have that jaded mindset, or things might not be going right at home, and a lot of times they're not even making enough money. I'm gonna be honest with you, like this is a hard job. I've seen officers get shot at from time to time, and it's crazy what they have to go through. But what we're doing with the Public Safety Trust Fund is to ensure that we support our local departments, support our sheriff departments in the state to ensure that they have the support possible. But they cannot use those dollars to buy military grade weaponry and do whatever they want to do with it. They have to utilize it in a way that's going to be beneficial to the department but beneficial to the community. And we're reining some of that in. So we are helping on that. And then part of that, also that trust fund, some of those dollars are going to get diverted to CBI, which stands for Community Violence Prevention. And this is something I've been working on since I've been in the legislature, ensuring that we get money to community groups that are doing the work in terms of helping folks doing conflict resolution. Because a lot of it can stop from just having a simple conversation with one another. I'm tired of seeing when people get in the heat of the moment, they grab a gun. Or, they grab a knife and they want to hurt somebody. In reality, let's figure out what are your triggers. Let's figure out some of the mental health and the illnesses and the trauma people have to deal with day to day. It's unbelievable what folks have to go through. They might put a smile on their face, but in reality, you can't ever judge a book by its cover. We don't know what folks go through. We don't know the pain and the trauma they're going through. And so anything can set this person off. And so we need to look at it and understand that it's all interconnected. And if we're trying to work on various pieces, whether it's this side of things or CBI or whatever it may be, we have to understand that we have to create the pipeline and connect it all. And so that's what we're trying to do. And I just want to say that, and then we can hear some more.
Just one more quick thing. We started to look into this, but I feel like it could be a good model. Out of Texas, of all places. So in Texas, they have this thing called the Texas Law Enforcement Peer Network. I don't know how long it's been in effect, but the idea is to a peer-to-peer program for law enforcement officers to help address stress, trauma, fatigue, and they actually started this to try to address police suicide. But there's this network that will train and mentor police officer volunteers to help their fellow officers. So I don't know, something that we started to look into, had some conversations with Sheriff Clayton out in Washington County about this. He's supportive of the idea. So we're sort of beginning stages of trying to look at this. But again, it's trying to figure out the best practices because we also know that, yes, it is a stressful occupation and the stress level and how that person is interacting with the community, of course, is really important. So appreciate you bringing that up.
Well, the thing is that I've done many a show about this, and we've talked about the fact that here you have people to say, what would you do if the police stopped you? And there have been brochures that have been put out. I did a forum out in River Rouge where I had law enforcement people from River Rouge, E-Course, from Highland Park, Detroit, as well as I had Ms. Dyer out in Washington County, who's out there in the Washington County Sheriff's Department. And one of the things that we talked about was what do people do when the police stop them? And there are brochures out right now, and I don't know if that was something that could be something instituted state senator or state rep in Warren, but we did it at the high school. And we gave wristbands to all of the seniors that were there to make certain that if something happened, if they got pulled over, the police would see this wristband that these students had when they were driving. And it allowed the students to be able to go and say they attended that seminar that the police gave, so that they knew that if they were stopped, as you mentioned too, Donavan, you have to worry about the mental challenges that some people had when they encountered the police. But the main thing is, do they have an opportunity to have brochures or something like that out that they could disseminate out to the residents, especially in the high schools, to let them know, hey, if you are stopped, this is what you should do. Because people don't really realize, too, keeping your hands on the steering wheel. Questions that you can ask back if you get stopped. If the police ask you whether or not if you have your driver's license, your proof of insurance, or your registration. So there's so many different things that people need to understand. And myself, even as a senior, I don't know all the particulars as to what to do. I've been fortunate because sometimes, times that I've gotten stopped in all my years, they've just given me warnings. And I had State Rep Sergeant Shaw from the MSP to talk about, they don't like to give out tickets. They'd rather give warnings to people. Because if they stop you and they ask you the question, were you speeding? They want you to tell the truth. They don't want you to tell, I don't know why you stopped. They said, if you know that you are speeding, just tell them the truth. But that's what a lot of people don't do, and they need to start realizing from what Shaw said, they're not trying to give out tickets as much as they're trying to educate you on the law and what not to do. So my question is to both of you, do they have that kind of methodology to where they could give out information? I know NAACP in Detroit, they have a pamphlet that they give out what to do if the police stop you. And that's something that could be encouraged by maybe other organizations in ACP out here in Warren or in other facilities. They can do the same thing.
Thank you. I know that ACLU of Michigan also has some printed cards. I should have thought about bringing some. Anyway, we'll get some for the next event that also has a sort of know your rights, the things that you should know, your responsibilities, and what to do when you're stopped. But I appreciate. So on the one hand, I totally appreciate that we need to provide this information. At the same time, someone sort of alluded to this earlier. Like people should know when they interact with the police that they're going to be treated fairly. And so I'm a big proponent of yes, let's absolutely educate community members on how to interact with law enforcement. At the same time, we shouldn't have to. We should just know that every single law enforcement officer is going to treat every single person with respect. And unfortunately, I don't think that we can say that with certainty right now. Anyway, I agree with you. I think I'm getting to the phase where after hearing so many people's really terrible experiences, and it just, one is reinvigorating, re-energizing the two of us to push as hard as we can for this, but at the same time, really just recognizing how deep this problem is and how, no matter how many Know Your Rights seminars, no matter how many cards we give out, it's not going to change the policies and the practices within our agencies across the state, and so we have to make those policy changes. Anyway, that's just where my head's at right now.
Sorry. Thank you, Rep. McKinney and Senator Chang, for holding this wonderful conversation. I often do a once-a-month topic on addressing the stigma, and this month we did grief and loss around the holidays. We had the Detroit Police Department attend, and at that time they shared information on their responses, like they often respond to crisis and things that were not really criminal activity. I know that we often add more on their plate, like having them do trainings, that they can respond to crisis when individuals are in a crisis and those things like that. But the budget does have a piece in there that allows social workers and counselors to work with the officers. Can you highlight that information? Because I'm often getting calls about that, and people are like, well, what about the social workers? Are they not working with the police officer? And I often say it's underutilized. So I've been trying to figure out a way to have us utilize that more often.
Yes, so we, last term, I think it was last term, I actually worked with a Republican colleague to pass legislation to create a community crisis response fund. We need to put more money in that fund. We got to put more money in this fund. It's in the DHS budget, but to basically provide money to local law enforcement to partner with either a social service agency or CMH, or you could hire, in your own agency. But the idea was, yes, we need more social workers to be on scene to respond. I know that DPD does have this program. There's others that have these programs. One of the things that we also really recognize is that we need to make sure that the programs that are in place are actually effective, because we've got to have folks who know how to do it effectively. Also, like, what is the best approach with the officer and the social worker on scene? Is it you have to, like, the protocols and really matter. And so we've got to be able to also collect the data of all the programs that are on the state. So we built some of that into the legislation, but it was, passed a couple years ago. We need to put more money into it, start getting some more grants out. I've actually had a couple, so my district is, partially Macomb, partially Oakland, partially Wayne, and I've heard from really small cities in my district that really want to actually move in this direction, but they don't have the money to do it. So I'm like, this is why we pass these bills, so we got to put more money towards it. But I appreciate you raising this, because law enforcement officers support this because they know that they are not trained behavioral health professionals, and they spend so much time dealing with mental health crises that social workers and psychologists should be the ones to deal with. So I feel like the more we can move towards that model, the better for everyone.
Got a question. My name is Tim, and I actually live in Centerline. I'm sitting and listening because I was curious when you sent out the email of what this would be about. And so I said, I'm going to go and just listen. As I listened around the room, I hear all this wisdom coming from around the room and all these experiences. But the key component to this, and I think you mentioned it earlier, is that the lack of law enforcement officers here. And so my question is there a plan to periodically have law enforcement interact with settings like this? Because I'm thinking of this gentleman here, retired police officer, and I was wondering, when he gets pulled over by the police officer, and you got lights flashing in your rearview mirror, what does that feel like, right? And so when a police officer is reminded of what that feels like, then he understands, whatever that implicit bias may be, to set some of that stuff aside, because you may be encountering somebody who's hyperactive or whatever the situation may be. So tap this thing down. But I'm just wondering what plans you may have for the future to encourage the law enforcement chief of police. Listen, send somebody out to the council so they can hear what the community has to say. Because if you don't know what the community has to say, you got no business trying to police them. They've got a badge, they've got a gun, and they've got the authority of the citizens to do what they're supposed to do. So they ought to be able to interact with us.
So thank you. That's a really important point. And so Chief Brown, thank you for being here. We have had some forums where we have had law enforcement here, but you're right. It's really important that they hear what's going on. I will say that I've had a lot of conversations with law enforcement over the past couple of years, but in more so one-on-one settings, trying to get feedback on the bills. But I think the ones that I've been meeting with typically have been the ones who are more interested in like digging in and figuring out how to make this work. But I think you're right. I mean, I will shout out ALPACT, because this effort is so important of just bringing police and community to just listen to one another is so important, and it doesn't happen enough. So I don't know if, you talked about this a little bit before? Well, okay, so I felt like you were talking about it without saying it, but do you want to talk about it? Okay.
Yes, ALPAC stands for Advocates and Leaders for Police and Community Trust. And basically what that is that we've started in Detroit, but in the Southeast Michigan region. And what that is where you bring in state, federal, local law enforcement leaders and law enforcement agency leaders and policing professionals, and bring them together with community leaders, community organization leaders, community members, and they meet we have them in different regions of the state. And basically, it's about relationship building. Now, there are difficult discussions that happen, so it's not a kumbaya moment. So it's actually, plenty of times, it's actually been pretty, pretty tense. But the thing about it is that you walk away each time with a better understanding of each other, and it's about building relationships, because if you can't be honest with each other in these settings, then that's why it happens, because there's no media, this is no media, and that's why, we don't really, but they say, well, that's why there's no media, there's none of that attention brought to it, so that you can be open and honest, and what's discussed in there stays in. But their community members can participate. This is not like some secret society or anything like that. But there's an agreement that you be respectful, and it's about building relationships. So that's what she means by ALPAC. It's called Advocates and Leaders for Police and Community Trust. And in this Southeast Michigan region, it's facilitated by the Michigan Roundtable for Diversity and Inclusion. In other areas of the state, our department, it's kind of like I hate to say oversight, we're like the facilitator of all of the organizations, because we took the model from Detroit and then replicated that model in Flint, Saginaw, Lansing, we got different regions throughout the state. But yes, that's similar. They meet monthly. They like I said, they meet monthly, and so these are. And I can tell you now, there's plenty of anecdotal stories and information about how the will of those relationships, the value of those relationships, turn into real life situations.
So if we could replicate ALPAC, right, so that it's also not just the folks who decide to go to this meeting, but which is great. I used to go to a lot of those meetings prior to being in office, but if we can try to replicate that at the community level with just sort of day-to-day officers, right, not the chiefs, not the managers, but the folks who are out on the street. I think if we can replicate that, I think that could be really meaningful. So maybe we can try to keep this. Maybe we can do this again, and to try to format it in a way. I don't know. We'll talk about
it. There is a program that they do. It's a group called Black and Blue Consulting, and and they are retired Kalamazoo. One's a retired captain of Kalamazoo PD, and the other was a retired detective sergeant at Kalamazoo PD. They're called Black and Blue Consulting. And actually, Stacy's a Detroiter. She's a Cass Tech grad. But yeah, so and they have a program in which they do kind of with the Kalamazoo PD and any other, they do kind of sessions of speed dating. Well, they have officers and they have community members, and officers sit at tables, and then you get up and move like speed dating, and you discuss things with each other. You get to know each other. Hey, how are you doing? I'm from this. And they do that with all of they have this program where they do this with all the new officers, so that these new officers, new recruits and new officers can meet the community. So they can meet the community in this setting, so that hopefully if you happen to see another young person or in a different setting, you have a different understanding, and you have an understanding of the community that you're involved in. It's kind of like a speed dating. They also do that they also do it for the Kalamazoo Valley Community College, their police academy, where the recruits actually go through a speed dating kind of thing where they learn and understand it. Like I said, this program is done, they're called Black and Blue Consulting, and they're out of Kalamazoo, but they actually do a program like that I think that local communities could replicate.
I very quickly too wanted to mention another thing. When it comes to the quotas that it seems that officers have when it comes to pulling people over, I recently started looking into how district courts are funded, because we share a district court with 2 other municipalities, and we found that in Clinton Township, which we share a court with, when they stopped writing as many tickets, which is a very good thing, the judges and the other municipalities got upset, because that meant that since our district court is self-funding, that meant that the number of tickets going into that court was going down, and people were getting frustrated by that, because it meant our cities had to pay for the court to operate instead of us making revenue from it. It seems wrong that we're making a revenue from these courts, and that they're self-funding so that judges are encouraged to do more guilty verdicts, and that police officers are encouraged to write more tickets, which benefits them with the overtime and contributions to their pension. So I was wondering, I don't know if that's part of this package, but I was wondering if that's something that's going to be addressed in the future, because I feel that that plays a role in why there's so many of these stops, which starts a lot of these situations that end very negatively.
Absolutely. So it's, yeah, y'all can clap up for that. Yeah, there's something myself and Jimmy Wilson, the state rep out of Ypsilanti, we're looking into it because he's over the subcommittee of the judiciary, which is funding the courts. Some of the things we're looking at, because it was mentioned before, I think I mentioned in my comments, you know, the unwritten quota rule, and then you got some other issues. I know Darwin touched on it in terms of, you know, some police not wanting to write tickets, they want to get warnings. But in reality, if you live, especially in the 8-mile border, and the history, systemic history of ticket writing. I remember getting pulled over, you know, as a late teenager, 18, 19, like 5-6 times on 8 Mile in the span of like 8 weeks. And it was by the same cop. And, you know, Ferndale, Hazel Park has gotten in trouble, I think, under the Obama administration for targeting and over-targeting folks on 8 Mile. I've been hearing it out of the city of Warren as well, East Point, anything that touches the 8 Mile border in particular, I'm sure is happening all across the state. It pretty much all across the country, but that's something we need to look at because we are incentivizing officers writing these tickets because there are funding our courts. It is a system that we need to look at and try to nip it in the bud. So we are working on it. It's not a part of this particular package, but we are working on it. And then Jimmy and I and a few other folks, we're discussing it.
So thank you all so much for coming. You know, when Rep. McKinney and I talked about doing this event, it was a while ago actually, and we really just wanted to have this conversation and hear from you all. And so honestly, we're just so grateful for you sharing, especially those who shared their own experiences or experiences of your friends or neighbors or loved ones. Just thank you so much. This is a big priority for the two of us and many of our colleagues. So we're going to continue to do this work, and I think maybe let's try to do this again next year.
And the last thing, I want to give a shout out to Global Interpretive Services. So Dano is here, he's the founder of it, and I just want you guys to talk to them because they do a lot of working with police departments in terms of interpretive services. As you probably know, Macomb County, as well as Wayne and Oakland, we're a mixed bag, we're a mixed community, we're a melting pot. And I don't know if you guys know this, but in my particular district, we're Warren Centerline in Northeast Detroit, we have the largest Bangladeshi Bengali community in the state. And so, you know, sometimes that language barrier is there, and you can't necessarily communicate what the person you might have put over with the officer that's speaking English. And they do a good job in terms of having those interpretive services, and they've been working with our corrections department at the state level, and they were able to save us a lot of money and heartache because of our interpretive issues and misunderstandings. So I just want to give a shout out to them. I'm not sure if we have time for them to just make a comment or two of what you guys heard today and what are you guys looking to do in terms of how we can support each other. So yeah, just real quick, I know we're at the end, but just want to give you guys the space.
Thanks. I just wanted to say that we do work with law enforcement, and we have an e-learning course that we developed to help police and public safety learn how to work with deaf, hard of hearing, and either low English speaking people or people who speak a language other than English. It's championed by Senator Santana and supported by Senator Chang and Representative Donavan, and every leader that we've talked to has been so supportive of the bill that we've got going through the House right now and the Senate to try and get funding to train all officers in the state of Michigan. And what that would do is standardize practices for all police officers on how to recognize these people, these communities, and then how to know how to work with them and not violate their rights. And it doesn't just give them an overview on how to work with these communities, but it gives them actionable tips on how to work with these communities. So it's not just, sign this, can I help you, these kinds of things, but it gives them actionable tips, like how do you give a sobriety test to a deaf and hard of hearing person, because it's different than how you would give it to a person who is hearing, and because of some of their issues within the ear. So it's a very important learning course, and we're just so happy that we developed it and that everyone's supporting it. And I think it's important for all of you who are here and you've expressed so many concerns that you understand that this e-learning course is out there for people. Dano, did you have anything you want to add? Real fast.
Thanks for the opportunity to speak for a few minutes. Just to clarify, Dawn is the owner of Global, the CEO. I'm the executive vice president. Thank you, Donavan, for the promotion. Appreciate that. We recognize at Global that effective communication is important, and we work passionately towards trying to work to help people. We also understand that police officers, because of the atrocities that are out there and the tenure that we have with experiencing problems with the communities that we work with, police officers do not receive training at the academy level to learn how to work with these communities, and that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to educate them through the academies and through the police departments so that these atrocities can be avoided. So we listened intently today to everything you folks have said, and it resonates with us very much. We appreciated the opportunity to be here today. I'm sorry, do you have a question for us, sir?
Hearing impaired and visually impaired, people who are come in contact with law enforcement. Our program is called DALE. DALE stands for Disability Awareness for Law Enforcement. DALE, Disability Awareness for Law Enforcement. Another colleague of mine, Darnell Blackburn, who was here, he's working on that program with us. And so it's been well received. We've got our fundings from Community Foundation and Hudson Weber Foundation. It's not a whole lot. We only been able to do a few police departments. We did Hamtramck. It was very well received. We have another program dealing with the powerfully impaired that have maybe on probation or get in contact with the law, have to go to court so they understand their probation. I thought it would be like maybe 1 or 2 a month. I get like 5, 6, 7 a month. Powerfully impaired people with autism. Understanding the court system. So, thank you for what you do. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. I really do appreciate it. We're going to do this again. Sometime we're going to plan this in the new year. Happy holidays, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy Kwanzaa, and Happy New Year. We don't see you guys until the new year. Police Navidad.